Thank you all for joining and for being with us. We promise an insightful and interesting webinar. Our topic today is Skills of the Future and Today's Talent. This webinar is the first of many series of webinars covering contemporary issues which are of interest to many. Also, we're excited and delighted to announce our partnership with Degreed. For those who don't know Degreed, it's an upskilling platform which allows organizations to build their own learning ecosystem. It helps to consolidate learning experiences, it provides visibility into top skills, and facilitates career mobility within the organization. It basically empowers employees to learn, grow, and advance in their careers by providing them, of course, with the relevant tools and skills. Let me present to you Isail Paz, who will be our speaker on this webinar's topic. Isail is a talent management professional with more than 20 years of international experience in HR, risk management, and compliance, mainly in financial services. He also studied organization psychology, and he holds a master's degree in business administration, focusing on process re-engineering. He is currently the head of business solutions for EMEA and APAC in Degreed, and in this capacity, he has been supporting organizations with their learning transformation by deploying Degreed to help them reach their digital skills goals and objectives. Isail will be explaining to us how, with the new and ever-growing technologies and customer priorities, you can still ensure that your people have the right skills needed for today and what's next. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will be answering all those questions at the end of our webinar. Isail, please tell us more about how forward-thinking companies are now redesigning their whole approach to employee learning, aiming, of course, to continuously uncover and cultivate emerging skills.
Thank you, Sabrine. That was a very kind introduction of yourself, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be partnering with you to help bring these important messages to your markets. Allow me to share a little bit of what we've been finding in recent years through our research. Hopefully, the screen that you can see is coming properly in your site, and I will let you have a little bit of glimpse of some of these insights that Sabrine, you were talking about. Before we can talk about the skills of the future, I just like us to have a small pause to think about the skills of the past. That is giving us a very rich and meaningful insight on how can we tackle the future and be ready for it. And I'm showing on screen a very simple example of how the evolution of skills has really happened. If we think about how the energy or the lighting sector has been evolving over the last 100 years or so, you can see how the different artifacts and the different gadgets and the different technologies that were used for the provision of light have been evolving. And with that, new skills have been emerging, right? The skills that were required in the past to create candles, right, to provide candlelights, are definitely different to the ones that we have today, or the ones that we need today in order to be able to offer LED lighting systems. And if we think about it, the next evolution step for this sector is really on transmitting Wi-Fi and internet powers through bulbs, right, through the light grid itself. So soon we will be able to remove the different routers and Wi-Fi extenders that we have in our homes, because every single room, wherever there is a light bulb, will be able to provide us with a Wi-Fi signal. And again, the skills that will be required for providing such goods and services are different from the ones that we have today. So if we think about it, one of the main drivers that is pushing the entire planet, all regions, all industries to develop and find new and emerging skills is the evolution that we are going through, right? You can extrapolate this very simple example to all other industries, right? If you think about how car manufacturers are today changing and getting ready for electrical engines, moving away from fossil fuels, petrol and diesel engines, right? We have a lot of clients in that sector, and they are all trying to find how can they upskill and repurpose some of the knowledge and the skills that they have in today's workforce and get them ready for what we is expected to happen between 2025 and 2030 with a very big evolution on car manufacturing. So what does this lesson is teaching us? Well, to start with, we need to also ask why, if we know and we have had all of this information coming from the past, why most organizations are not doing anything to get ready with their skills, or why they are not as prepared as they would like it to be in order to face the future challenge. We perform studies with different partners year on year. And in one of those studies that we did in the recent past, we went out and asked to CEOs of different organizations whether they thought it was important to, have an inventory of the skills that they have as an organization. And you can see on the left-hand side of the table that almost 90% of people agreed that it was really important to have a clear visibility on the skills that they have, right? Almost 80% thought that they could improve the way that they were today measuring and knowing and understanding the skills of their organizations, right? And almost 75% knew that measuring skills was almost as important as the provision of knowledge or the provision of learning itself. However, almost half of them don't do much with skills, right? Less than 50% do any formal measurement of the skills supply that they have in the organization, right? And less than a third of them have nothing other than as needed type of skills reviews, right? So why, if they know that skills are a key component for the success and the provision of their own business in the future, so few of them are doing something with it? And amongst the many reasons that we found is that there are very different challenges in trying to get a grip on all of these variables. Deloitte did a study a couple of years ago and found out that 3 of the main components that are preventing organizations to have a better grip on their skills supply is that, to start with, the lifespan of people are increasing, right? We are very grateful because a lot of the recent developments in the health sector are allowing us to live longer, which means that then we can invest more years of our productive life in the workplace, right? Or creating new companies, either being an entrepreneur or being an employee. People can invest more of their time in the organizations or in their professional careers and development, right? So they need to work for longer, basically. But the time that people are investing in specific roles or jobs or companies is reducing, right? Before, people were entering companies and staying there almost for life, right? You can see people coming out of universities or apprenticeship schemes, and they will join a big corporation and they will stay forever there. 50 years later, they will be retired and they will be living happily ever after. And today, what we see is that people are changing jobs in companies and roles almost every 5 years. And that, as a result, has reduced the lifespan of skills. The skills that we knew 5 years ago are no longer relevant today, right? So you have longer times of productivity, more frequent changes in people's desires and appetites, and shorter lifespan of the relevancy of certain skills. If you think about what's going on in the social media and in the marketing space, no one predicted 10 years ago that today we will be having influencers and YouTubers and TikTokers, right? Those type of roles emerged almost by the evolution of the social media technologies that were placed in front of consumers for them to become the owners of their own career, right? And that is something that is, again, giving us a hint on how can we, at an organizational level, anticipate those type of changes and foster a culture of emerging skills, right? What we are now focusing on is helping and allowing organizations to create their own incubator type of skills where they can start to take a proactive approach and get themselves ready for the future, right? A future-proof talent strategy needs to account for all the skills that exist inside of the organization, right? Not only the ones that are defined at the top, but the ones that are also identified at the bottom. Think about this example of the YouTubers and the TikTokers. No one in a corporate environment at the top of the house decided that being an influencer was going to be important in this year. It was the user who was creating this type of trend. Where I want to go with this is that if organizations learn to leverage the power of their own employees, the power of the masses, the power of the crowds, they can take very quick and gigantic steps towards better understanding what they have today in terms of the skill supply and where they have gaps that they need to focus for the future, right? 6 steps that we have found are helping organizations that we do business today with are. Number 1, they are allowing people in the front line to share the skills that they see, that they think, that they define, that they need, so they can perform the roles. Nobody knows better how to resolve a problem in the front line, but the people who are facing those problems day in and day out. So if you focus on allowing people at the forefront of your organization to share with the center, to share with the headquarters what skills they are needing and craving and facing, that will give you a very powerful hint on where you can focus your people development strategies. Because they are dealing with those type of problems day in, day out, the second suggestion that we have is allow them to have a design thinking approach, allow them to experiment with new skills, allow them to test and try out if things are working or not, and switch and be agile in finding adequate replacements for such skills or for such strategies. Thirdly, allow people to connect themselves so they can share the knowledge and the skills that they have, the expertise that they have acquired, and so they can help others at the same level to perform these activities. If you think about it today, in your current role, whenever you are facing a problem or a new challenge, or you just need to know something, the natural reaction that you do is you look around you or see who of your colleagues or friends or your network can help you with that problem. So you are constantly seeking for peer assisting. You don't go and try to find things and in an organizational database and see if the answer is there, right? You usually go to the people that you know, to your circle of trust, to the network that you are building to try to find someone who has experienced this before and who might be able to help you with this problem, right? This is allowing you as an organization to start to develop a new habit, right? If you use the power of the habits that humans develop over time, then you will be starting to drive a new culture just by allowing them to do what they do in a natural way, which is seek for help, face a problem, and be creative and innovative when trying to resolve those challenges that they are facing. But that's not enough, right? Allowing them to connect, allowing them to share with you, allowing them to find and understand new ways of doing things is not enough. You need to make sure that there is a close feedback loop, that you are measuring and comparing and contrasting what of those ways of working, ways of resolving things is working better, right? Which skills are emerging more frequently? What new topics are being discussed at the front line, right? Then that will allow you to craft a much more coherent and relevant people development strategy for your organization. And then you can inform them on how you are progressing towards going to that vision. Yeah, you can share which milestones have been achieved, and you can help them keep the focus on the things which are important and the things that are adding value. But there's no way organizations can do it unless they know the data that they have and they use it and they mine it accordingly. They need to fully understand the supply and the demand of the skills that they have and the gaps that they are creating or have been created in the organization along the years, right? These 6 little steps, although seem and sound very simple, obviously require an effort for organizations to have an intention and a purpose on creating the relevant initiatives to allow for these things to happen. And as a result, data density will be harvested by the organization and more informed decisions can be made almost in real time by having a better and clearer understanding of your supply of skills or the talent that you have inside of the organization, and then think on your demand of future needs and future projects and which of those skills that you have in your supply can be reused and repurposed, focused in where you want to go into the next organizational objective. In essence, what we are allowing or encouraging organizations to do is to try to challenge themselves and think whether they know if they have today the skills that their organizations need in the future, right? It's not only whether you have the skills to succeed today, but whether you have or you are fostering and promoting and incubating the skills that will allow your business, your organization, your market to still exist in the future. Think about how many organizations have disappeared in the last 100 years. How many Fortune 500 companies are no longer with us because they were unable to upskill, reskill, and adapt to the new circumstances. Video companies who were, having a lot of retail stores with, video hardware devices like CD-ROMs or Blu-rays or, video cassettes, they don't exist with us. Full companies that were dedicated to systems and technology engineering have also disappeared because they were unable to keep the pace of change. They were unable to anticipate the skills that they would need it in the future in order to survive, right? So I would like to leave you all with this last message, right? Whether you think that you have the skills that you need in order to succeed in the future. And with that, I will open up Sabrine for any potential questions that might have happened throughout the discussion.
Thank you, Azail. Yes, we have one question. So they're asking how many months of data you think can give valuable insights to enable some sound decisions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. It's not about months of data, it's about density of data. You need to gather a lot of data points from different variables, from a lot of people, from a lot of jobs, from a lot of roles, and for a relatively long period of time. We have been harvesting information and skills and roles for the past 12 years. And we are in a position where we are in a moment of starting to have predictive analytics that will allow us to understand trends in those components. So there are many ways in which you can reduce perhaps the amount of time or the amount of data inputs that you can bring into your models. But depending on how far you want to go and how deep you want to understand, you may need to focus on that density of data that you need to collect, right? Because it's not one single variable for a certain period of time, it's many variables for many periods of time. Hopefully that gives an answer to the question.
I have also another question. Someone is asking, what instruments can you recommend to find out which skills will be relevant in the future?
Mm-hmm. There are many skills in the market, and in the last 5 years, perhaps a lot of organizations have started to invest and focus in artificial intelligence, which is not the thing that data science, right? It is applying certain mathematical models to all of these data points that will allow you to have a result which has a short or a close correlation with a specific industry and with a specific skill. We can talk perhaps in different forums and sessions on specific alternatives and options. I would say that depending on the nature of your business and depending on how far you want to start to predict this, there are plenty of options in the market. If you just browse AI and skills, you will get a plethora of organizations which are allowing you to do that. Obviously, I do have a biased response to that. The grid has been investing 12 years in data density, and we are able to offer organizations tools to understand the skills that they are having today and identify the skills that are emerging already. We are still at a point where we can start to predict the skills and how they will go down. We did a research last November in the market where we ask a lot of organizations again where they are going with this, and we call it the state of skills and the skills that have been identified as endangered, which are about to become off the market, which potentially could be a topic for our next webinar, right? There is so much information on that space that we can spend just an hour talking about the different ways of having predictive analytic models to help organizations with this challenge.
I think this question also will take some time to be answered, but this one is like how to develop future skills.
Yeah, and that will take also perhaps another hour. But in short, I guess the best way of developing future skills is first understand what you have today. So understand your supply, and then define where are you going and size your demand, right? That's the best way of knowing what you have versus what you need and understanding how big is the gap in the middle. And that will give you key information to allow you to focus on different initiatives to foster the development of skills. Remember, skills are associated with the proficiency or the competence that we are able to exercise a specific task. We do not acquire skills just by reading a book or watching a video. We need to acquire the knowledge, we need to retain the knowledge, and then we need to apply the knowledge. And as we apply the knowledge over various repetitions, then we become proficient, right? Think about going fishing, right? The first time that you go there, you know nothing, you don't know how to throw it, you don't know how to pull it. And it's until you do that for several hours. Experts say that in order for someone to be fully proficient, they need to invest 10,000 hours in the same activity. Think about the gymnasts, ballet dancers, all of those people who are outliers, super talent in the world, is because they have been investing a lot of time in doing the same thing over and over again, right? So it's by the exercise of the applicability of that knowledge that you acquire a skill and you become proficient.
Interesting. I have also another question. So this one, is this the same as capabilities frameworks?
Yeah, we hear a lot of that in the market. In essence, a capability framework, it's like an umbrella of different components, right? It's a model that says in order for someone to reflect a behavior, it needs to be comprised of different components. For example, a capability could be having a business acumen, right? Or having customer centricity, which is a behavior. That behavior is fueled by the skills that I have in order to demonstrate that I have customer centricity. For example, do I have listening skills? Do I have empathy skills? Do I have a problem solving skill? And all of those things could be combined together, allowing me to have customer centricity, right? So in essence, or short for the answer is skills are the basic indivisible unit that build capability frameworks. The big difference is that when you go and talk to an employee in the front line about having customer centricity, they may need a bit more context to understand that. But if you go and tell them that they need to improve their listening skills, they know exactly, immediately, where and what they need to focus on in order to demonstrate that thing. So it's easier to transact with skills and it's easier for people to digest the skills than to be transacting or digesting capabilities. Not the same, but they are related.
Okay, and this also can lead us to another very interesting question. From where do organizations need to start for defining a skills strategy?
I think the best place to start is by identifying their skill supply, right? They need to start creating inventories of what they have today. And then by analyzing the business strategy, start to identify the critical skills that will allow them to fulfill the business strategy. Let's take, for example, car manufacturers who are now focusing on electric engines, right? Tesla could have a business strategy which is have 10 million units of electric vehicles in the market, right? How you translate that into the skills that you need to have in order to fulfill that ambition. First, you need to know and understand, do I have people who know how to build electric vehicles in my organization? Yes, no, right? And then create that inventory of initial skills. That will give you the starting point. From there, you can unfold how can you make that convert into having these 10 million units of electric vehicles in the market. But you need to start by knowing what you have today. You cannot go into the future if you don't know, what tools you have today. And you cannot go to the future if you don't know what the future is. That horizon, right, business initiative is that will drive and dictate what demand of skills you will need to have to succeed in that future.
Sounds simple, but how long does this take to be implemented, basically?
It depends on the ambition of the organization. We have some clients, and I can speak of the financial services because that's where I specialize the most. But if you think about it, perhaps 5-7 years ago, new payment mobile contenders came into the market, like Apple Pay and PayPal, and all of those new industries that were competing or willing to compete against the banks for online payments and money transactions and money management, really, right? So they have been investing and having those business strategies perhaps for 3 or 5 years prior to going into the market. However, when they reach a point of going to the market, that only allows banks to respond in a very short time, so they could react to build a new strategy, to create the new skills, so they can compete against these new contenders, right? So while some organizations may have the luxury of taking 3 to 5 years, others who need to stay afloat and competitive only have a small window of 24 months to react, to have something meaningful, not to lose business and market share. So it depends a lot on the ambition. Some, if they are not responsive and reactive enough, will just be too slow to react, and then they will be eaten by others, or they will lose so much market share that they will cease to exist, right? Depends a lot on the ambition of the organization.
Yeah. All right. I still have 2 more questions. So we need to wrap up after those 2 questions. So the first one is, what are some of the top skills you are seeing now in the world?
I think there are 2 components. Technology skills are definitely ones which are evolving a lot, creating and developing applications. And on the other side, human skills are also starting to become more relevant, right? Because you can automate a lot of roles, but you cannot make these automated jobs or robots to understand the context of a situation. So things like problem solving, like empathy, like listening, the examples that we were using before are still very relevant. And what we see is that they are coming together and amalgamating to be even more important.
Okay. And this is our last question. So someone is asking, are you saying that in this new world, we are going to talk about skills and no longer competencies?
I think we're going to talk about both topics still in this new world. However, I think there is a much more big emphasis on skills as a driver for competence and competencies, right? If you think about the skills as the currency where you can transact and build competence, it's going to be a much more easier, faster, and meaningful way for organizations and employees to understand themselves together, right? If you think about how employees build their own profiles and develop their own competencies, are because they want to either do what they are doing better or find a new job, get a promotion, earn more money, right? Become more important. And the only thing that allows both sides of the equation to talk the same language is using the same currency. And that currency in people development standards is skills. It's the easiest way to do. That's what Europe did with the euro. They needed to come different currencies, different economies into one single marketplace, but they needed to find a common currency, and they called the euro. Now, organizations need to have a market which is attractive for employees, and the way that they can transact is about skills. It's easier to understand skills and competency.
Okay. I received another question, which I find very interesting also. So someone is asking, what harmful behaviors do you see most in the market?
Harmful behaviors in the market.
Yes.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I don't think there are harmful behaviors in the market. I just think that people are behaving differently, which is having a different consequence in the market. Some are reacting positively, adapting, being agile, and understanding that they need to change. And others are becoming more defensive and more protective. And those who become protective and defensive will tend to be off the rest of the trend and the rest of the market, and they will face a negative consequence for themselves, for their own, closeness. The more you open, the more you'll be able to weave in and harness that power that we were talking initially, right? The more you understand the market, the more you connect with the market, the more you create an ecosystem where information flows back and forth, promotes a constructive behavior as opposed to a protective defensive, which usually promotes a destructive behavior. And that's perhaps the easiest, fastest way of describing those two patterns that we see in the market.
So what do you think are the common problems organizations face when building this kind of framework? Now, so that we're talking about behaviors and all of that.
I think the biggest problem is that they don't know where to start, right? I worked 10 years for a single bank in my past, and 3 times we tried to implement a capabilities framework or a competence framework. And each one took us 3 years to define, create, get approved, socialize. By the time that we were able to implement, it was no longer relevant, and people were not engaged and they were not using it. And then we needed to start again, and then took us another 3 years, right? So the biggest problem is we don't know where to start, and we keep doing and repeating the same mistakes that we did in the past. So if we keep doing the same things that we did before, we will keep having the same results that we have before. In order for us to change that destructive loop, we need to start thinking and doing things differently so we can have different results. And perhaps those results are closer to what we were aiming for in our people development or talent management objectives.
All right. Thank you, Isai, so much. Do you want to close with anything? Do you want to say a last statement or something?
Yes, thank you so much. Again, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Very good questions. I love the depth and the breadth of the questions. We can keep talking about skills. The grid is constantly partnering with different research corporations. We have studies done with Harvard. We have many different studies that we can keep unfolding. And I'm very happy if you are willing to take me again in the future to perhaps organize, something to continue with this interesting discussion around how can we better understand the skills of the future. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining and for these very insightful, very engaging questions. we talked, Isaiah just talked about future topics, so please give us some of your feedback about this, and if you have any suggestions for future webinars, we have at the end, at the bottom, you will see a red banner where you can click and you will be directed to a survey. In this survey, basic, very simple questions about your feedback and about any of your recommendations for our topics. Thank you so much for your time, and this session has been recorded. It will be available on the ABAMI website, and we hope to see you next time in our webinar. Thank you so much.